Hi, everybody, and welcome to Benchmark QA's Quality Management in an Agile Enterprise. I'm Jeff Roth. I'm the Vice President of Consulting Services, and I want to welcome everybody to the presentation. Really appreciate it if you could just make a note in the chat window to let us know you can hear us and you're not having any problems, so we know everybody's on board and can hear our audio, and then we'll get started. One of the things that we're going to talk about today, or many of the things we're going to talk about today, are Agile fitting into the enterprise. For our conversation, we're going to really focus on briefly talking about the mindset shift from project management that we have today to product management, which is really more of an Agile mindset. In order, as we do that, what happens is the Agile team builds itself and gets comfortable. It's like a ship. They get moving on, and the enterprise itself begins to do things that disrupt or prevent the Agile ship from making progress. So we want to do some things to protect that Agile ship, and we're going to talk about three distinct tools that help us get there in Agile. One of them is the definition of done, one is team norms, and one is retrospective. All of this really ties back to quality, and how that happens is kind of interesting. So as I talk through this, kind of what I want you to think of is this thing, which you probably have all heard. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. But really what we're trying to do here is teach you how to think differently about software development as you shift to this product mindset. It's not to say that you're not going to build software through a project, but you're going to think of it a little differently, and that difference is improve both your Agile implementation in your team, in your group, in your enterprise, and all of this is going to drive better quality into the organization. So what do I mean when I talk about project mindset versus product mindset? Well, the easiest way to think of it is think of a bridge, right? A bridge, when you build it, there's nothing there. You build the bridge, and then the bridge is done. And then you go into maintenance, and you do some painting, some checking, evaluating. It's very temporary. It has a start date and a stop date. It's a slave to time, because we have that time frame that we're trying to build it in. The resources are assigned to do that project work, and then they're done. And there's really that support and maintenance cycle as after you get the main deliverable complete. Okay? From a quality standpoint, quality is really a role in that project, and it's part of the process. And that's the way we've been traditionally thinking about software development. Right? Now think about a product mindset. And I think the Apple iPhone is a great example of a product. It may have started with nothing and then appeared on the marketplace. That could have been their first implementation of the product, but it evolves over time and it changes, but it's always evolving. It consistently changes over time and hopefully improves and gets better, right? So you're thinking about it as a constantly evolving implementation with a dedicated team to help it evolve over time, right? It's a holistic solution. It's not just a bridge. Right? It's how is this making my customer experience better? How is it improving our operations, making it more effective and more efficient? And it operates on frequent feedback loops. Customer said, I want a bigger screen. Customer said, I want a better battery life. Customer said, I want more networks, right? All those things happened to the iPhone, and they evolved over time to have more of these features and more of these capabilities. Who did it? Customers. Now, when I look at quality in this process, quality is inherent in the product. When I deliver a product, it's got to be of the highest quality because that's what my customer wants. If it's not, I better quickly fix it and get that quality up because that's how I'm going to stay good enough for my customer's need. And as long as I'm good enough, my customer is going to continue to want my product. So again, this is that mindset from fixed to a very constant evolving process. Let's talk a little bit about the context of enterprise projects. Many of you are probably familiar with a diagram like this, right? Demand came in such as project proposal. It came into the project portfolio management system or team. They would evaluate that project and put it over to project management. They'd pull in finance resources and HR resources to execute on that project. They'd have some level of performance management, which is the lower part of the document, that tracks and measures that project's successful. And then there's some enterprise architecture that influences how this project and portfolio work is going to occur. And this is sort of the classic lifestyle that we've we've incurred in project management. Right? Now let's look at how that's reflected in the product world. And some of you may have seen this. In the product world, that demand still comes down, but that demand comes to that evolutionary cycle. So at an executive level, we're going to define the strategy, the portfolio, and the product, and those are going to be constantly reevaluated. Okay? Now, constantly doesn't mean every day. It may mean once a month. It may mean once a quarter. It could mean once a year. But it's a big picture view of our product, right? And our strategy is going to talk about all of our products together. Our portfolio is a group of products that work together, and then there's the product itself. So the iPhone is part of the iOS portfolio, right? But Apple has a strategy for all its products, and you can see the Mac, which has nothing to do with iOS, is interrelated, right? So they've tied them together, so that's part of their overall strategy. So they come up with a way to think of this picture, right? Now, what we're all familiar with in probably our work today, and those of you who've been doing Agile, is you've seen this quite a bit, is then we start dealing with the release. The release is what we're going to do this next few weeks together or a few months together. The sprint is maybe a week or a couple of weeks long, and the day-to-day work is what we do at a tactical day-to-day level to deliver our actual product, right? All of this is tracked and managed differently than what we've seen in the project because it's constantly happening. Right? It's consistently going forward, right? And that quality process is inherent in each of these tasks. So we're implementing quality at a daily level. How do I get things done good enough to put it out the door as working software? That's our mindset. I've talked about this sort of broader context. I'm going to talk about something that you're probably familiar with at a more common level for project management. Hopefully most of you have heard of the iron triangle or the golden triangle, which is project manager's rule. And the project manager's rule is the golden triangle has three sides to it. It has a side that deals with scope, it has a side that deals with schedule, and it has a side that deals with cost and resources. Now, project managers have been taught over time that they have to manage and balance these four sides. When one side changes, the other two must also change in order to deliver quality. But if scope increases, then the schedule and resources don't increase, you're going to have quality issues. You have to balance these triangles. And all of you can tell stories hasn't worked, right? Where scope has increased, schedule stayed fixed, and resources have stayed fixed. And what's happened? The project had quality issues, right? Because they didn't keep the timeline in balance. Worst case is scope increases, schedule decreases, and resources decrease, right? How can that be in balance? It's not. If I don't strike that right balance, I'm going to have quality issues. This is classic project management 101. It's taught in every project management class, and every project manager tries to explain this to their executives, and the execs go, I don't care, this is the money you've got, this is the scope we have to do. And what happens? We have quality failures, right? All the time. So take these three elements and talk about them, how they occur in the Agile teams today. So we have a timeline, and in that timeline, we have sprints, and those sprints are regular intervals of time. So we know a sprint is going to occur every sequential, let's say every 2 weeks, right? And it's always going to be 2 weeks, unless you're using like a Kanban process, which is a little different. But most people are using Scrum-type methodology where they have a fixed sprint time frame. So now we know, based on our project triangle, our time is fixed, correct? Great. So let's look at our resources. Well, for the most part, in a Scrum implementation, the team is size. We may say in one sprint, we need to add a person, a subject matter expert to help us get through a hump, or a couple of extra developers to do some more work, or someone from infrastructure who knows something we don't know, or a DBA to do some database work. But ultimately, our team sort of achieves a certain set amount of people. So again, what have I done? I have fixed my resource pool, or slightly fluctuated my resource pool. So what happens then? Well, then I get into delivery, right? My actual productivity. And my actual productivity typically starts low in my first couple of sprints because we're getting ourselves organized, our team is forming, we're kind of figuring out how to do some things. we're probably not producing software those first couple of times. That doesn't mean that we're not getting tasks done. It doesn't mean that we're not completing user stories. We're probably doing analysis user stories, probably doing user stories that are around technical setup. And those are being accomplished, but we're not producing software, so to speak. We're not putting software out the door, right? And all of a sudden we get a spike and we start really producing software. And then that scope is going to start increasing and decreasing based on what's going on in that team. But it's still going to occur in a fixed time frame with a fairly static set of resources. So I'm starting to meet my quality goals just because I've managed two sides of that triangle. My quality is starting to improve, just inherent in the structure of an Agile delivery. Let's talk about traditional projects. What happens to a traditional project? This is what it looks like. We have a beginning, we have an end, and all of our features are delivered at the end, right? So all of our risk is moved to the end, right? Because all of our product is at the end. All of what the customer wants to see is at the end. So we're definitely putting all of our quality risk at deferring them to the final work effort, and we're increasing our risk. If I do the same picture for Agile, we're doing features in short intervals, so we're decreasing our risk because we're doing it in smaller components, right? And doing it in short intervals to deliver a incremental feature change or new features in incremental ways. So we're holistically giving the customer what they're asking for in short time frames, decreasing our risks to quality, or in a sense, increasing our quality outcomes. Product mindset versus project mindset. Project mindset is the big bang delivery. Product mindset is we're constantly giving you an improvement. Interesting shift here. What did I tell you? I'm getting an inherent quality improvement. All right, I'm going to take a little sidebar here. This is my box. I'll get off it in a minute. There are studies, and I can give you the references in Psychology Today and some other optical studies that show that multitasking is a myth. Do not multitask. People pretend to multitask, and men and women have no difference in these psychological studies. Because of the way the brain works, your brain actually switches. And it will do task A, then it will switch to task B. And yes, I will agree that many women were trained at a younger age to do this and appear to do it better than men. But in fact, the brain operates exactly the same for men and women in all psychological studies. And it is demonstrated that there's about a 40 and in some cases 60% decrease in productivity if you attempt to multitask. So think about it. I'm sitting at my desk. Someone comes over and says, hey, Jeff, I'm stopping task A to answer their question. Multitask. Right? I answer their question. I go back to task A. I have to remind myself where I was. I have to catch up and get going. So all of a sudden, my multitasking productivity is down. Agile says, don't do that. Focus on one task and get it done. So they're trying to get you efficiency by getting away from this multitasking mindset. The matrix organization has failed partly because of this. And it's an important thing to take into effect. It has many tendrils. I can talk about it at another time, but simple answer is close your laptop, stop looking at your smartphone, pay attention to the meeting you're in, and pay attention to the task you're working on. You will be more productive. But I'm guilty of this as well, so I'm the first to say I do it myself. I need to stop. All right, let me shift back to Agile and how it gets. It's a little different when you look at it from a product mindset. If my customer comes to me and says, oh my goodness, I work 10 miles away, I need to be protected from the element, and I'm sick of depending on the bus schedule, build me a car. If you build me a car, that will solve my problem. Well, that's the way our customers come to us and ask us to make software. So what do? We say, well, I've never built you a car, but I'm an engineer. I can probably build you a car. Sure. Give me $5 billion. I'll build a factory. I'll manage all this. I'll tell you what, in 4 years, I'll have you a brand new car ready for you. The customer says, great, let's do it. And we blow all this money. The car gets produced, and the customer says, what is that? That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Well, it protects you from the elements, and it's a car. Well, that was a lot of money and a long time before I got what I actually wanted. So in a product view, I say to the customer, well, wait, hold on. What you said, you need to get back and forth to work. It's 10 miles, so it's not terribly far away. and you want to be independent of the bus schedule. Get you a bike for a very small amount of money and some clothing to protect you from the elements. I bet that'll work for now, right? We'll improve on this. But today, I can get you a bike now in 15 minutes. Well, maybe another half hour to get the clothing, right? And now we've spent, what, a few $100s instead of $5 billion? So iteration one, I give you a bike, and you try it out. You say, God, this is great, but I'd like something a little more stable. It's a little bumpy. Okay, we'll put an extra wheel on it. Give you a 3-wheel bike. Couple of bucks more, we'll get you an extra wheel. Boom, you got a new bike. Now it's 3 wheels. It's a little more stable. You're like, wow, that's pretty cool. You know what? There's kind of a big hill. Could you help me out? I'll tell you what, I'll put an electric motor on there. It's quick. It's easy to charge. Low energy. It's great for the environment. And I've got one right here, and it's easy to install on your bike. Now I've done iterations. I've improved my product for you. And I've given you what you've asked for without having to spend millions and billions of dollars. It's not a car. I agree it's not a car. But it's getting you to and from work. It's defeating the elements. And it's easy to use. Maybe in the next iteration, you want better protection from the weather. We add an enclosure. All of this is iterative product development. It's not giving you the perfect thing right away. It's giving you good enough to try it out and figure out what improvements you need. That's a product mindset. All right, big question is, in the enterprise, that's great if I have a small team. I've usually got big teams, and those teams need to work on multiple different things concurrently. How do we do that? Well, there's a concept called Scrum of Scrums, or using multiple Scrum teams to work together. In a Scrum of Scrum setup, we may have one team that's working on the amortization calculation team, and we've got another team working on the customer account management, and they have a product owner that's shared across those two teams. That helps them focus on what they're doing. We'll have a content management system that has a product owner dedicated to the content management system. Then we've got a print services team, and they're the lead product owner who's organizing all the product owners together, is driving the product from the strategic level into the other product owners, and also managing a team so they're being productive. This is a way for the teams to individually work on components but integrate them together. And they integrate them through this concept of both the shared product owner roles and the Scrum of Scrum, so they can discuss and negotiate how to actually manage these multiple teams. The Scrum of Scrums tends to focus on what the team's going to do together as opposed to what they're doing individually. Because individually, the teams are empowered to do their work. It's an important concept in an enterprise implementation, and something we can explore more at another time if you'd like. Let me talk about what most of you probably experience, which is what I call a hybrid model. Hybrid model is really a hybrid between Agile and Waterfall. Now, if I were to talk to some people who I admire very much in the business, they'll say, don't do this, this is a bad idea. I personally, when asked, will say, you can avoid this, I think you'll be better off. But I live in the real world. Real world is what happens, and so I've learned to live with it. Most projects are planning, requirements, design, dev, test, and release phase. But what they're going to do when they get to requirements is they're going to take their requirements, distribute them down to user stories, and start splitting them amongst multiple Scrum teams. And those Scrum teams are going to do task tags, tests, and bugs. And then they're going to roll together and do a group test or an integration test before they go live. That's the most common way we've seen this occur. It works. It has limitations. It's not good or bad. It really just has limitations in that you're losing some of the effectiveness of the self-empowered, self-controlled, and self-organized, because now you have to work together and depend on the big bang requirements approach to get started. But that's a more common approach because it helps the business and the customer sort of scope out and finance the project they're trying to do. They need to get a handle on how big is this, what are the areas and scope of what we want to focus on so they can get their budgets, and then they want to release at one time, so they want to pull it all together and release it together. It's a very common approach. The other approach which is being advocated, and this is controversial and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, is something called SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework. You can go out on the internet and search for this, and the Agile community is very polarized on this because For those that are advocates for SAFe, they'll say, you know what, this is a pretty good way for me to explain this to my executive team in a way that they can see how Agile is implemented across the enterprise. It really deals with a lot of the concepts. It deals with the portfolio and architectural vision at an epic level. It deals with the program and product structures, the team operating structures. It's very executive friendly. It has operating bumpers in which people can produce software within. And it fits an enterprise mentality. It's a picture. Right? For those in the pure Agile community, they're going to say, wait a minute, Agile isn't prescribed. Agile is self-organized and self-determined. As the moment you do this, you're telling me how to do it, and that doesn't make sense, because my team has to figure that out. The other thing this doesn't deal with, and I got to say I'm on board with this, deal with the culture shift. That culture shift from a project mindset to a product mindset, where a project manager is no longer king, but instead a trusted servant as a scrum master, right? That shift takes some thinking and takes some doing. And this prescribed methodology doesn't deal with it. So in order to be successful, you are going to have to think pretty carefully about not just what does it look like as a technique and a tool set, but also how am I going to deal with the culture change. And that culture change goes to our Agile shift. Protecting the Agile shift. So what typically happens is a bunch of developers convince their development manager, we want to do Agile. He goes, okay, do it. So they form a team and they get operating, and all of a sudden they're living on the wonderful island of Agile, or the cruise ship Agile, so I should say. And the cruise ship Agile is plush, right? It's got a swimming pool, it's got palm trees, it's awesome. And they are cruising along. They're being successful. Well, what happens with anything that's successful, right? A luxury liner like this is prone to be attacked, right? Who's going to attack it? Corporate finance is probably one of the big pirates that are going to go after that ship. And they're going to say, you can't operate this way. You have to follow our rules for corporate finance, and you have to split this up between cost centers and cost optimization, and I need a capital and expense accounting, and blah, blah, blah. And another pirate that's probably going to attack your ship is the PMO. And they're going to say, well, we've got to follow these regulations. And you're going to go, all right, let's get them pirates, right? We're also going to see they're going to want templates, and they're going to want a definition of roles and responsibilities, and they're going to want you to go through their phase gating, and the managers and executives say, well, I can't manage a team that says, leave me alone. I've got to manage this to be successful. So they're going to step in and tell you how to manage your team, right? And then you're going to have the business owners, and the business owners are going to say, I know you're software development, but we should run everything because it's our money and it's our business, right? And in some extent, they're involved, but they're business owners who say, no, wait, this is mine. Oh, and let's not forget HR, because HR has a whole bunch of rules on how to do things, right? So all of these pirates are going to attack your ship and basically take it over. And what's going to happen? This ship's going to fail. So what do we do? How do I fix this? Well, let me give you one of the tools, three of the tools. Definition of done, team norms, and retrospective. Okay? Starting with definition of done. So for those of you who don't know what a definition of done is, it's an agreement that the team hammers out that documents what done looks like. And I'll give you an example. If development codes a solution, they could say that's done. If, however, the team agrees, you need to do unit testing. So it's not just that you finish coding, but unit testing has to successfully complete. And then they say, well, wait, we also want some system testing and user acceptance testing before it's actually done. Well, now my definition of done has to explicitly say those things. So I am telling as a team, we agree that done looks like this. Now, the most common way you actually hear that articulated is that a user story has acceptance criteria, and all the acceptance criteria has been met. Well, that's a common, easy thing to do. But what if you said, and this is just a quality mindset on this, regression tests have been run, or evidence of unit tests are produced? Well, that we agree as a team, we can do that. Now we have something that we as a team have agreed on, and it's explicit. That's one thing. What if you have regulations and you're required as part of your regulations to produce a certain level of documentation? Well, your definition of done can include that. Now, hold it. Wait a minute. Didn't I just meet the PMO requirement for a regulatory document that has to be produced? So I can help my PMO pirate maybe become part of my crew and see that I can do what I want. If they tell me what they need, perhaps I can find a way to produce that in my definition of done. Perhaps you have a time reporting system that you need. You need to capture time in, people paid and get evaluated by HR. Right? Well, your definition of done can include that. You have to report your time in or chimes, that time reporting system. Now my definition of done includes something that satisfies HR. What about my manager? He may say, boy, I need this report filled out at the end of every user story at the end of every sprint. Now that's a definition of done. So all of a sudden I'm looking at this as a tool that's more importantly giving me information that meets some of these pirates so they're not attacking me. Instead, they're starting to be co-opted as crew members to see that this serves them as well. So where can I do this? Well, the most common way I thought of this is to do it at a sprint level. And I agree. That's the place I would start. When a sprint is complete, this is what done looks like for anything within that sprint. But you can also do it at a release level. And we have release notes. Well, we could do that at each sprint. We could do it for just releases, depending on what our team agrees makes sense. We might have to do product documentation. Do we want to do it at a sprint level or a release level? Okay. We might have to do some level of product notation, or we might have to measure our product success. So we want to implement some product level metrics, and we can do that at the definition of done. The enterprise itself might be saying, this year we're focused on initiatives and we want to gather quality metrics. So that initiative can be incorporated into my definition of done. So again, I can deal with my definition of done at multiple levels to address different parts of the organization's needs. And I can bring them in and say, hey, you're not excluded. You have a voice here. And because we're professionals and adults responsible for our team, if we agree that we can do this, we'll communicate. Does this meet your need? Here you go. We've established it into our definition of done. A lot of times, enterprises will provide a framework and say, this is the definition of done the enterprise must do to meet core enterprise goals. Not things your team has to do, but the core enterprise. The product team may go back and say, and there's some things we need to at a product level that are product specific. And then the team works on release and sprint. And here's the interesting thing about sprint. Quality becomes a big issue. For certain user stories in a certain sprint, you may say, our definition of done is looser for this user story than for this. So if we renegotiate the definition of done every sprint, we can based on the work that we're doing. Very important differentiator. So now I'm agile. I'm adapting my quality goals and my definition of done goals at a sprint level, but still respecting things like the enterprise product and release level goals. So this is a very powerful tool that helps me both achieve quality and helps me accomplish any enterprise goals. So how do I do this? Well, first of all, for those of you who love documents, get over it. The definition of done is not a document. The definition of done is a conversation. The conversation in which the team talks about things and says, how are we going to agree done is done? Because Team A might be able to achieve done in a different way than Team B. So each team needs to figure out their definition of done. Now, like I said, there could be enterprise and product level things, and this is where the compromise comes in. The team may say, I don't like that one, but I'm going to have to accept it because it's an enterprise level. But from a team level, the team could say, you know what, for this particular user story, evidence of test makes no sense. We're just not going to do it. It won't help the regulatory requirement. It doesn't really help anything. We agree in this sprint for that set of user stories, we're not going to do it. But it's an explicit conversation where they talk about it and they agree that makes sense. So having this conversation each sprint starts to say, hey, what do we think Done's going to look like in this sprint? Based on continuous improvement and learning, you might say, boy, we really need to start modifying our definition of done to include evidence of unit tests, because we trusted development was doing it, but we got bitten. So I think we now all agree we need some evidence that before it gets turned over to the QA folks or the business, we can see those unit test results. And Jeff says, you're right, we made a failure, we'll expose that. That makes total sense. Okay? So we establish an agreement. We discuss, we come to that agreement, and we write it down so we have something to revisit. But it's really that negotiation and that established agreement that counts. Now, again, I live in a realistic world. So 3 of the team members may feel done looks like this, 4 of the team members may feel done looks like that, and they may not be able to agree. So in the team, there has to be a decision maker. And that decision maker is, dun, 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 the product owner. The product owner can say, thank you all for your input. I feel like I'm clear on what you all have said, and in order to establish a compromise, here's what I feel the definition that we're going to work with. Let's try it, and we can revisit it next sprint. It's not consensus. Be clear on this. It is one person in that team, the product owner, determining and deciding what's best for the product. That's a product mindset. But when we have it, we now all know what done looks like. So there's no QA person walking over and said, you said this was done. Where's the testing? Right? There's no developer saying, hey, I thought you were going to build tests for this. There's no BA going, I said this is what I wanted. How come you didn't do this? Because you've been clear. You all were in that conversation. You all wrote it down. You can pull up a piece of paper and say, I thought this is what it means. Remember we talked about this? You have something to fall back to. So it's an important quality tool. At the same time, it's an important tool to help you negotiate with your pirates. That's one tool. And normally I'd ask you for questions, but I'm going to move on. So what's the second tool? I believe this tool is equally important and probably heavily neglected in many teams. This is what's called team norms. It's another agreement. And it's an agreement that should be done in sprint 0 right from the get-go. The reason is it defines how we're going to operate as a team together. In team norms, you tend to talk about things like code of conduct. For example, I'm from the East Coast and I like to talk. And interrupting people is not a problem for me. It's a very Italian way of living, right? Well, you know what? That doesn't help people communicate. As a matter of fact, in Minnesota, people feel really stepped on if you jump into a conversation to know something. So code of conduct might be, hey, you know what? Only one person talks at a time. It's just respectful for our team. We feel it's an easier way to talk. And let the person finish. And you might even use a talking stick, which is a technique to have one person talk at a time. That's a code of conduct, right? Be nice to everybody. Don't diss people. Listen to their ideas and respectfully disagree. That's a code of conduct. And sometimes you have to make that explicit. We have some sample codes of conduct if you want to see them to explain what kinds of things you, sample team norms which you can see. But what am I doing again? I'm forming an agreement on how the team is going to work. How the team is going to work and communicate together. What else might I talk about? Team logistics, right? We're going to use TFS. So in order to use TFS, everybody needs to put their user stories in TFS. It's not a definition of done. It's a team norm. It's how the team operates, right? We're going to report time at the end of every day so our morning stand-up has accurate information. That's a team norm. We're going to report our vacation at the beginning of a sprint so everybody knows who's going to be here and who's not. That's a team norm. And it's a logistic. So all of these help us, again, establish how we're going to operate. You know who loves this? Strangely enough, HR. This is all their policies they've been trying to implement for years, right? You sit and you watch a video once a year, and then you go and do whatever you want until somebody gets busted, right? This is defining it and agreeing upon it as a group. I want to operate this way. And you can do whatever you as a group agree on doing as a good norm. It's a very powerful tool. What happens? If I know how I'm supposed to behave together, and I, by the way, continually improve this, because as we operate, we learn, ooh, I made some assumptions. We probably should have a team norm that gets rid of that kind of assumption. Right? We change our team norms, and now the team all agrees this is how we're going to operate. And a new person comes in, they can see our team norm agreement that we'd written up, and we can talk to them about what some of our experiences are. And they're on board with, oh, this is how I'm expected to behave in this team. And it's very good. It's what works for that team. And each team's going to have different team norms, because you get a bunch of A-types in one team, a bunch of introverts in another team. Those two teams are going to operate differently, and they're going to want different norms. A team norm might be that you only have to spend 50% of the time in the pit, and 50% of the time can be spent at your own desk. That's a team norm. We agree on that. Totally fair. The introverts love that, because I don't have to be in this hyper fishbowl environment all the time. I know I'm going to have some time away. So HR likes this. The other thing you can do with team norms is that you have something that you can use for performance management. When HR says, I want to evaluate performance of your people in your organization, they're going to want to know how each individual operates. And when you get the product agile mindset where it's a we solutioning, that doesn't fit the HR norm, because if we work together, some people have different skill sets, some people have different strengths and weaknesses, but if the team itself is very productive, then shouldn't I be looking at the team itself as a performance, and part of my performance as an individual is how the team performs? That's a different way for HR to look at performance management. And so team norms is a way to establish that and say, here's the norms we're following, and this is what we want to be graded on. Are we doing these things? Because we've already told you what we're doing. We've told you how we're going to behave and how we're going to operate. And we've agreed we are going to do that. Very powerful tool. Transparency and communication is a powerful quality tool because expectations are clear and I know what my job is. When someone asks me for a roles and responsibility chart, I say, no, let's agree on how we're going to operate together as team norms, and we all do the job. And I will get better quality from a good team that's agreeing and functioning within their norms than a team that says, but that's not my job, that's not my role. Because that's a I'm not, I can't, I don't, versus we agreed to do that. Powerful tool. And the pirates will be held at bay. Third and final tool I'm going to talk about today is retrospectives. I, as a QA person, am in love with this because I now have continuous improvement in my toolkit. I've wanted continuous improvement. I've tried to get it, and it's very difficult. And by the way, in my survey, I'd say about 70% of teams ignore the retrospective. They do a demo, but they don't take the time to say, who are we as a team? How can we improve? So, why do we have a retrospective? Well, Norman Kurth said it really nicely. It's something that every true learning organization has as a part of its culture. And it's one of the best ways to grow project by project into a smarter and increasingly successful organization. We talked about definition of done. We talked about team norms. Using the retrospective as an opportunity to revisit those items allow me to improve them. Allow me to reestablish my agreements or modify and improve my agreements. When I have a retrospective, there's a couple of things I want to come out of it. I want actionable, deliverable items to follow out of my retrospective. If we just have it to be a bitch session, nothing's going to get fixed. But if we say, hey, let's throw that in the backlog and let's address that in the next sprint, that's an actionable item. We say, oh, you know, we need to modify our agreement. Everybody in agreement here? Yep, okay, we're going to do this. Let's check back at the end of the sprint to make sure we've all done this. Let's talk about it during the sprint. Are we doing what we said? That's part of an agreement, is to be explicit about our agreement. Right? If we have ongoing obstacles in our productivity, the retrospective is to say, boy, you know, John is an awesome guy, but he's pulled 10 ways from Sunday. We really need dedicated time from John, or we're not going to be successful. Can we figure out a way to get a better dedicated time from John? That's a real obstacle that a retrospective can solve. Okay? That continuous improvement opportunity is the hallmark of quality assurance. It's proactively trying to fix what you do before you go to your next work effort. So think about this. This is the way an organization improves. This is the way the PMO is going to get better metrics. This is the way HR is going to get better information. This is the way a manager is going to feel that his team is operating better because he can see changes in the team. He can say, this is what we're going to change. This is how it's changed. And finally, and really, very importantly, use the retrospective to celebrate your successes. Right? The fact that you didn't complete all your user stories is not a failure. You completed X percentage, whether that's 60%, 70%, 100%, 120%. You should celebrate that. If you look back at your history and say, boy, look, we've improved. We were first doing 60%. Now we're doing 80%. We've made an improvement. It's still not 100. We have room to grow. But we've been getting 80% of our stories done. That's great. Joe, you know what? That behavior we talked about, it's improved. Right? We're all communicating better together. We're functioning better together. We're getting better quality software out the door. Let's notice it. So how does this, for those who are familiar with it, look at your Agile life cycle. We have a project backlog. We have a sprint backlog. We have daily Scrum meetings where we plan and discuss the work we're going to do today and what we accomplished yesterday and any impediments that are in our way. We have cycles, 2 to 4 weeks of iterations, and we use these tools every day in our immediate scrums, in our immediate work effort, in our sprint, and we look at our big product and we use them there as well. So we've got to fit all this into our full cycle. And what you'll start to see is that ship will continue to sail forward, and those pirates who initially attack will start to help out and start to improve your ship's quality and the ship's efficiency. That's how the enterprise changes, because the enterprise has to start adopting some of these principles, not just my little team on my boat. So I want to thank everybody for attending and your participation, and I'm so glad we got to do this. I hope it was helpful, and I look forward to our next topic, which is going to be DevOps, and that is an offshoot of what Agile has done to how the operations team, the development team, and the QA team are all working together and now collaborating instead of 3 separate groups. So we're going to talk about that more in the spring. So thank you again. Signing off.